Hello! Once again, everybody out there on the What's This Bird Facebook page and all the other places where you might be watching us on the ABA's YouTube channel and the ABA's Twitter feed. Once again, I am Nate Swick, and I am joined by Greg Neise. It has been a minute. It's been a while since we have talked to y'all, and we apologize for that. There's been a lot going on in the bird world and elsewhere, but we are excited to get back here and talk some bird identification with everybody. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We will try to get to them, but we also have some photos, per usual, that I have taken from the ABA's What's This Bird Twitter feed, or not Twitter feed, What's This Bird Facebook group, where you can join and ask your bird questions. We're happy to answer those. But some of the more interesting, difficult, whatever pictures from the last couple days, maybe the last 2 days, I snagged, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. Greg, how are you?
Hello. Oh, I'm good. Absolutely beautiful weather here in Chicago right now on the backside of Cristobal.
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about that tropical storm and the birds that it brought up your way. What have Midwest birders been seeing? I mean, the Cristobal, this tropical storm, it formed very quickly in the Gulf of Mexico. It went up kind of the Mississippi River Valley. That was kind of the
Pretty
track
much.
that it took.
Pretty much.
And of course, whenever those storms happen, birders are always sort of excited for storm waifs, storm carried seabirds that get frequently carried quite a ways inland. What have people been seeing?
Well, and for those of you watching who aren't quite aware of what we're talking about, so when there are tropical cyclones, the seabirds that are typically far from land, and definitely not inland by any stretch of the imagination, get pulled up into the eye of the cyclone and swirl around in that relatively calm eye, and sometimes to fantastic heights, like 10,000 feet, and are carried inland. And then when they exit, they get blown by the winds and show up in places where you would never expect. And Cristobal, which really wasn't all that much of a storm, came through and deposited sooty terns in Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Indiana. And sooty terns are birds that you typically have to go either to the dry Tortugas or take a pelagic trip to see. It also deposited laughing gulls in many places. I think there were 40 laughing gulls at Kentucky Dam the day the storm went by.
Yeah, and I just threw up a map here on your screen of the path that Tropical Storm Cristobal took. You can see it kind of did shoot up just a little bit to the east of the Mississippi River, and it's that sort of eastern side. So when you think of a hurricane spinning, it's spinning in a counterclockwise direction typically. And so that east side of the storm is going to be the one that all the birds are kind of getting pushed up and deposited. You can see, Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, Kentucky, all those places. That's where those sooty terns. And sooty terns are kind of classic storm waves. It does not take much more than a stiff wind to knock them way inland.
And I was a little surprised there were no tube noses, but it's typically, if we get another hurricane or two, there probably will be some shearwaters or a petrel or something showing up at one of the inland lakes.
Yeah,
in Kentucky, Tennessee, or Arkansas.
Too.
Exactly, it's early.
This is the time of year when a lot of the sooty terns are breeding. There are a lot of babies out there over the ocean, and they tend to just go where the wind carries them. And I know in the case of the Indiana bird in particular, it was a young bird, this year's bird.
That was it, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And speaking of young birds,
yeah, that's kind of our theme today. So a lot of the pictures that I grabbed from the What's This Bird group are of young birds. It's baby bird season, and baby birds. When we talked last time, if you can remember back that far, we talked a little bit about the difference between juvenile. When we talk about juvenile plumage, juvenile birds, how that is a very specific time in the bird's life. That first set of feathers that a bird has right after they lose their down feathers, that is their juvenile plumage. There's a lot of juvenile birds out there right now, and they
Yep.
are a little bit weird, and they frequently throw people off. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if you have any questions about anything that you're seeing, wherever you are, please leave those in the comments, and we'd be happy to look at those or
Yep.
answer your
And
questions.
that
and do the
goes
best we can.
and that goes also for the folks watching in the Illinois Birding Network.
Illinois.
We've got you. I'm watching there, so if you have any questions about anything related to birds, really just pop it up, and we'll do our best.
Yeah. So, barring any questions, I don't see anything in Facebook or wherever else we're doing it. So we'll just go and straight to the pictures, Greg. And this is one that you sent me that I thought was pretty interesting. From June this year, just now. I had a little bit of trouble with this one. What exactly are you looking at with this bird?
Well, whoa, hang on, my computer just went a little wonky. Just give me 1 second here. I've got like 6 or 8 windows layered on top of each other. Okay, so we're talking about the June 2020 bird that's in somebody's
correct.
hands.
Yep,
Okay.
the one that the guy with the orange gloves.
So, half of the people who look at this are going to be like, "Oh, I know what that is," and the other half are going to be like, "Oh, that's a," and then a few people are going to be, so. To the people who know what this is a very obvious juvenile European starling, but if you thought it was a cowbird, that's nobody's going to wag their finger at you, because the reason that I asked Nate to put this picture up is because of this starling's bill. It is a very young bird, just recently fledged, and it's got a short conical bill that's very unlike the long spike-like bill that you expect a starling to have. And when birds fledge, they keep growing. And the bills, especially birds that have longer bills, ibis and herons and rails in particular, the bills keep growing for a couple of months after they're out flying around, and they can be very confusing. So when the babies are coming out of the nest, you got to keep that in mind too. That we always talk about structure and bill shape and things like that, but when you get a bird like this, it can be very confusing.
Yeah, now's the time of year where that is sort of rules that you think of when you're identifying birds all the time sort of get thrown out the window a little bit because of things like that. And I was glad you mentioned ibis, because that's one where I live here in the southeast. White ibis, juvenile white ibis, always throw people, because not only do they have much shorter bills than the adult birds, but they're brown. I mean, they don't look like white ibises, and they always manage to throw people off. So yeah. European starling. Sorry, I'm trying to share this on my computer.
One thing you might want to do is go if you want to see some really interesting juvenile plumage. Go to the ABA website under identification, and on the identification landing page there's an article about juvenile warbler plumage, and this is all pictures taken up in the boreal forest during summer. And there's a lot of common birds that people in the eastern half of the ABA area are very familiar with, things like black-poll warbler and yellow-rumped warbler, and you won't be able to tell which is which, because these birds are in a plumage that, unless you're up there where they're breeding, you're never going to see it.
Yeah, John Lowry mentions real quick. Thanks, John. How you doing? Talk about gape for a minute. Yeah, we should probably back up just a little bit and talk about how to identify baby birds, period. Right? So if you're seeing a bird that looks a little odd, how do you know what you're looking at as a gape bird, as a juvenile bird, or a bird that has just recently fledged? And that is something, if anyone out there was paying attention during or watched Robin Bailey's virtual bird club meeting where she talked about birds and nests, she talks about gapes a lot. Or I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. She talks about fledgling birds and how to identify fledgling birds a lot. And one of the things that you'd want to see is the gape, right? So the gape is that part, you can see it in this bird right here that's in this person's hands. It's that yellow line where you can see the mouth extending all the way back underneath the eye. So that's called the gape. That is essentially like a visual clue for the adult bird when it's bringing its food. They see the gape, they know that they gotta stuff food in that hole. It's an evolutionary advantage for young birds to get fed essentially. And when they just come out of the nest, they have that egg. Yeah, they have that. And when they've just left the nest, they have that. So if you see that, it sort of fades away over the next few weeks. But if you see that, you know that you're looking at a baby bird.
Yep.
Yeah. So should we go to the next one there?
Sure.
Here's another one. This is one that a lot of people in the eastern part of the continent are going to be seeing a lot right now. And it's not terribly difficult, but it does show some features that can definitely throw people. What do you see on this one, Greg?
Well, there's a really big hint right in the center of the bird.
Yeah.
And that's a thing when looking at juvenile birds, or not like this one, there's usually a good clue. And we see the blue in the wing panel of this bird, and there aren't a lot of birds that have thin bills like this that are blue. Well, there just aren't a lot of blue birds, period. So, but now we look at the shape of the bird, the shape of the bill. It's not any kind of a seed-eating bird like an indigo bunting or a blue grosbeak. It's got a thin thrush-like bill, and that's what this bird is. It is a thrush, an eastern bluebird.
It is an eastern bluebird.
Out of the nest.
Yeah, and so one of the neat things about this bird, and I'm going to blow it up just a little bit so you can see a little bit closer, is that you see the order in which the feathers come in when we're talking about this bird. So you can see it's got its flight feathers, the tail and the wings. Those are already blue. So it's going to retain those flight feathers through the entire first year of its life. It will molt its body feathers over in the upcoming fall. But those flight feathers are the flight feathers that it is going to have. Those are essentially adult-ish flight feathers that it's going to have for the first year of its life. So they are already looking like bluebird, like a bluebird, wings and tail that you will see on any other bluebird an adult bird that you see flying around. So that will give you the clue on this thing. And it goes to show that, these juvenile birds frequently have much streakier plumage during this first few months of their life before they molt it in the fall. And they also have to hold on to those flight feathers for much longer than the adults do. The adults will typically keep them for a year. And so these birds will keep their flight feathers until the next fall. So more than a year, like 14 to 16 months. So they can get pretty worn by the end. Yeah. Looking pretty rough. Chris Ortega asks, what is a burb? You got an answer for him, Greg?
I do, actually. So Chris, just hang on to that. Let's hang on to that question, and we will come back to that in just a moment.
Yeah, he's going to find the important question. There's a Nick Lund article that was posted on Audubon's website not so long ago that actually asked that question, what is a burb?
But we will definitively answer that question in just a moment. So let's talk about this.
I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about our next one here.
Yeah, pulling this one up. So first thing to do is kind of break it down into what type of bird we're looking at. So kind of a slight bird with slight features, but it does have sort of a thick bill. We're looking at a warbler here, just based on structure. And this is a warbler that can cause a lot of people problems, especially this time of year when there are young ones coming out.
Well, I would say that consistently over, it doesn't matter what time of year, unless you've got an adult male, this is probably the most confusing warbler out there.
Yeah.
It's actually... you can identify this bird partially by just how plain it is. It The things that really stand out are the wing bars, um, and a little bit of yellow here and there, and some white around the eye.
Yeah.
But for the rest of the bird, it's just kind of nondescript, gray, nothing.
Yeah.
But the kind of heavy bill is a good indicator of what species this is, and it is a pine warbler.
It is a pine warbler. Time of year. John asked time of year. All these pictures were taken from the first couple weeks of June, so I decided not to put the time of year because I didn't want to throw anybody. But all of these are right now. And as Greg says, pine warbler for this thing. Living here in the southeast, pine warbler is one of those species that always gives people trouble just because they can be so plain. Especially right now, the female birds, and there's a lot of fledglings, really young birds coming out that look even duller than the female birds.
Yeah.
But the things I always look for on a pine warbler are, as Greg said, those two wing bars, pretty obvious on this bird, and it does have the broken eye ring. Right there, that's good, and it's got a big bill for a warbler.
Yeah.
If you've seen a lot of warblers, a lot of them look kind of small and slight. I've got another one later that we're going to look at that's much slighter. But pine is a very chunky warbler, and that big bill is.
And if you're,
it's a good.
And as Nate said, pine is a big chunky warbler, and if you're not really familiar with them. Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that if you were to mistake this for a vireo or a thrush, no one would hold it against you if you weren't familiar with them.
Yeah, it's a very vireo-y warbler. There's a good reason why people sometimes get these mistaken for things like wide-eyed vireo or yellow-throated vireo in particular.
Yellow-throated. There are always reports in the Carolinas, particularly in the southeast, of yellow-throated warblers in the winter. And they're not.
No, it's pine warblers. We have them all year round. All year round. I want to throw back to Gape. I'm going to go back to that Starling real quick and call attention to something that Tim Kalbach says, one of our admins in the comments. He notes that it's worth noting that lots of adult birds can show some yellow at the base of the bill. He frequently sees comments on photos of adult birds calling them fledglings based on the color visible at the gape. For instance, Bluebird and Phoebe. Yeah, it's a great thing to note. Phoebe in particular does seem to retain a little bit there, but not as much as you'd see on a fledgling bird for sure. But good thing to note. Thank you, Tim, for that. Len Kopka says that pine warbler is sometimes mistaken for Cape May. Yeah, they can be, especially the female Cape Mays that can be very brownish all over and not terribly streaky. But structurally, they can be very different. Cape May always strikes me as a very small, skinny build warbler, very compact front to back. Its tail is relatively short, whereas pine warbler is a little bit longer and certainly thicker in the bill and the legs.
Yeah, and the Cape May has a, if you can get a good look at it, has a rather uniquely kind of decurved almost bill.
Oh yeah,
it's a unique shape, and if you can get a good look at it or a good picture of it, the bill is quite unique.
Yeah, but in the fall, pine warbler can look like a lot of different birds. That's why they're so frequently difficult. Let's move on to the next one. I like to choose this one because this is the classic friend texts you a photo of a bird that is roosting on the inside of their eaves. What is it? I think I've seen this picture many times.
And going back to Chris Ortega's question, this is a burb.
Oh, this is a burb. Yeah. Very round.
Very round, fluffy, puffy. This is a burb.
Yeah.
But yeah, we always get a picture. Yeah, just like you said, this was under my neighbor's awning, whatever. And this species roosts like this, and it's rather endearing, especially when there's a pair of them together because they like to snuggle up. And what throws people is the white spots, which you don't see when the bird is active and flitting about your yard. But when they roost, they fluff their feathers up and they have all these white spots over them.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a Carolina Wren. This is a classic Carolina Wren behavior. You can even see a little bit of the white eye stripe on this bird because he's got his head kind of turned around and tucked back into his back feathers right here because it is roosting. But yeah, and what I always find amazing about these photos is that is so difficult to tell size. Like you have no comparison, no way to compare size. I've seen people call these things hawks. I've seen people call these things, any number of things. Because sometimes when you get in real close and you get a real clear picture, you can see their claws. And Carolina Wrens have like really big claws for the size of bird they are. They have massive feet, and you can see those big old claws. And they're like, oh, that's a hawk. That's got to be. But no, it's a little Carolina Wren, and this is what they do. I've even seen them do this on my own eaves, underneath my own front porch. And New Smyrna Beach, Florida. Common in the southeast, of course. Carolina Wren.
Yep.
If you've got any questions about birds or bird identification, please let us know in the comments. I'm trying to keep an eye on all the places where people are watching us here, and Facebook, also on YouTube and Twitter. So please let us know if you have any questions about birds or birding. Right now, summer is a little bit of a slow period for birding across much of the continent, unless you are in southeast Arizona right now. But
boy.
everywhere else, this is breeding bird and molting season, so it's kind of a difficult time.
Southeast Arizona is on fire,
It's on fire right now.
not literally.
Well, actually, I think literally too. But
yeah, there are some fires too.
it's fire season.
It's like there's so much going on. Like such fires. But what's the birding in Southeast Arizona right now is off the hook, and if you, again, go to our website on the front page, the Rare Bird Alert, click into that to get an idea of what's happening. Just a couple days ago, there was an eared trogon.
Eared quetzal now. They changed
eared
the name.
quetzals. Yeah, I'm old. An eared quetzal was in the Chiricahuas?
Yes, in Portal.
Yes,
near Portal.
In Portal. Just a stunning bird. Just a stunning bird.
One of the real kind of mythic species of like North America. Even where they're supposed to be, it is a bird that is not easily found, which is what makes it so amazing. And I think that the photos that were taken of this eared quetzal are some of the best photos taken of this species ever anywhere.
Yeah,
which is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Jealous, if you can tell. Very jealous of the birders in Southeast Arizona. All right, so I'm gonna throw another bird up here. We're talking about fledgling birds.
Oh, this is a burb too.
This is a burb too. This is when you said there was a burb coming. This is the one that I thought you were talking about. Yeah. This one is actually kind of a difficult one. So, Robin Bailey, when she was talking about birds and nests, and if you're interested in rewatching her virtual bird club presentation, it was really fantastic. You can find it on our YouTube channel. All of our old virtual bird clubs are on the YouTube channel, including the upcoming one this coming week with Juita Martinez about pelicans in Louisiana. So you won't want to miss that. That'll be this Wednesday at 8 o'clock. But back to Robin's talk. She was talking about how to identify baby birds. Well, you can see the gape on this one. Big gape on this one.
Quite clearly.
You can see the kind of awkward stance. You can see the fluffy down feathers on the eyebrows that make it look kind of like Bernie Sanders. So this is a classic fledgling bird, and I'll be honest, like this was a tough one. I did not know what I was looking at because there's a couple kind of orangey black birds in Central Oregon that it could be.
And for me, and I may, this is the first I've seen this picture, for me, what I'm seeing here is what looks like a big bill. From looking at it forward,
you are correct.
It's like the bill looks almost square. And the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm looking at a seed-eating bird, a grosbeak, I believe, in this case.
Yes.
And if we look a little closer, we can start to see a little bit of the face pattern of a black-headed grosbeak coming in.
Black-headed grosbeak. So yes, that was the consensus on this bird. There are a few people that suggested varied thrush as well. Another kind of orange and black bird of the Pacific Northwest. And I'll be honest, like I thought that identification was compelling, but as you say, Greg, that is a big bill, even at a weird angle.
But I think fledging. I'm not sure about varied thrush, but I believe a varied thrush at that age would be spotted like other thrushes.
That's probably true. Yep. Good point. Good point. Yeah. So black-headed grosbeak is your default large grosbeak of the northwest of Oregon. So that is what that is. And actually, if you go to find the picture the post that this came from, a little further down, they actually found the nest, and there were a couple other babies still in there, not quite ready to leave the nest, as this one was. This one just seemed like it jumped the gun a little bit. I would have thought it would have stunk around for a few more days until it loses those weird kind of feathery things on the eyebrows. But I don't.
There's kids can be precocious sometimes.
Yeah. There's got to be
and
one
that's,
in every bird.
One thing to point out is that right now is the time of baby birds, and almost all of the time, if you come across a bird that looks like this, just leave it be.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to save it. Don't pick it up. Just leave it be. If it's immediately in harm's way, like sitting in the middle of a bike path or something, just get it off the path, but leave it be.
Yeah, I think the worry for these birds is potentially cats, outdoor cats, feral cats. So if you're concerned about that in your area, you can kind of move it to a shrubby, like a bush or something. But the parents know, rest assured the parents know that it's out and where it is, because they do make a lot of noise when they're out.
And they do feed it. And one of the ways that birds, the adult birds, the parents will encourage a bird to fledge by not feeding them. They will hold off and stay a little ways away and force the baby out of the nest to come and get their food. And the first couple of times, when they first do that, they hit the ground, but it's all good. It's all good. So,
yeah, I saw that happen a couple months ago when the red-shouldered hawks in my neighborhood were fledging, and I was out taking a walk with my family, and the parents were like circling around above, like screaming their heads off. And that's how I found the nest, because the babies were sitting on the nest looking like they were about ready to leave, also screaming their heads off. They are extremely loud birds, red-shouldered hawks.
In my neighborhood, we had a pair of bald eagles nesting, and the babies are the biggest crybabies of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got, full-sized, ready to go, and they just sit there
flapping
and
their
whine.
Wings. Yeah.
Whine and whine and whine. Come bring me a fish. Come bring me a rabbit. And the parents just sit off like, nope, you got to come get it.
Yeah. Yeah, raptors are cruel. Once again, if you have any, we've only got a couple more birds here in our on our slideshow. If you have any questions about birds or birding, please let us know. I understand we don't have a ton of people. We all got to get back in the rhythm that we had before we went off for a couple weeks. We'll get there. Everybody. Yep. So I got one more. I'm going to do another warbler here. This one from your neck of the woods, Greg.
Yeah.
Rock Island County, Illinois. Some stuff you're looking at for this bird.
Like the bluebird, there is, if you take a moment to really examine this bird, there is one big glaring giveaway that's just staring you right in the face, and that is that single out of place tail feather that's stuck out, and you'll notice that it's mostly yellow with a black tip, and there's really only one bird that it could be, and that is a female or young American redstart.
Yep, American redstart. And I chose this photo to throw in there because in addition to being baby bird season, this is also molt season for a lot of these birds. So birds, they have 3 or 4 major processes in the course of their year, and that take a lot of energy and effort. And they don't usually, overlap these things. And those are migration, so spring and fall migration, taking care of babies, and molting. So all these are very energy intensive activities, and they typically do these one at a time. So as soon as the babies are out of the nest, boom, that's when a lot of passerine birds will start molting almost immediately. And that's sort of what's happening with this Redstart. I'm sure that it has recently fledged chicks. It's probably done for the year. And now it can, put all its effort, all its kind of energy towards replacing its flight feathers, which is kind of a big deal because, when they're losing feathers, when they don't have their flight feathers, they're at greater risk. So they have to be a little more careful. So as soon as those chicks are off the nest, a lot of times passerine birds are going to start molting, and you're going to start seeing some really nasty looking birds out there that look like they're going through a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's where, structure, there's even when something is looking really ragged, there's usually a giveaway if you get enough time to examine the bird.
Yeah.
All right, we got some questions piling in here in the Illinois group.
I see Tim gave us another bird from the What's This Bird group, and I'm going to throw it. I just grabbed it and threw it in our PowerPoint, so we can talk about that a little bit. But first, I do want to take Chipper's question there.
Okay, so Chipper Phillips says, like everyone else, I've got sorry, it's moving on me. I've got room for improvement in my flycatcher IDs to include Empids, peewees, etc. Yeah. Aside from the typical all-inclusive field guides and websites which overly simplify things, is there a go-to field guide or reference book just for North American flycatchers which gets into the molt, diversity, and seasonal variation? There is such a book, and that is Ken Kaufman's Advanced Birding Guide.
That's what I would have suggested. Yep.
And he dives into the Empids and other flycatchers there. Also, check out the Cornell All About Birds. But I'm going to flub this because I'm old and having brain farts. What is we are offering a discount to ABA
Birds
members.
Of the World. Yes.
Birds of the World. Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you are a member of the Birds of the World, if you subscribe to Birds of the World, you can dive deep into molt. So they have molt timing charts. They have details into vocalizations, and that is a really good resource for those kinds of deep questions.
Yeah, and I would second that what Greg said. The first bird that came to my mind was also Ken Kaufman's Advanced Birding, which is out by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Yep. It's probably the best one for Empids and a lot of other things. It covers a lot of kind of difficult ID questions like Sternaturns and Jaegers and a lot of other kind of difficult things, SCOP, whatever. There's also a book that George Armistead and Brian Sullivan, I think, did called Better Birding. It's by Princeton University Press that covers. I don't have it. I do have it downstairs. But it also covers some of those more difficult IDs and goes a little bit deeper than you would expect in a regular field guide. So those are the books that I would suggest for the resources that I would suggest for those sorts of things.
And Kaufman does a really good job of pointing out, like, look at this, and side by sides.
Yeah, and Ken's the first edition came out a long time ago and still has a lot of really useful information into it. There's a second edition that came out not so long ago that kind of updates a lot. But a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about as far as peewees and Empids and stuff like that has not changed a ton in however many years. I mean, they're difficult, but they're a lot of people are a little more confident about that, and a lot of that started with Ken Kaufman's Advanced Birding.
So what was the bird that was that Tim popped up that you were gonna?
Oh, before we get into that, Brenda Chase asks, what is meant by a first spring bird? Yeah, that's kind of a less than useful term, to be completely honest, because it's different than a first year bird. I would say a first spring bird is the way I interpret it is a bird that was born the year before, so the summer before, and then it's going through its first spring the next calendar year. Right. And there are some species that actually, have a first spring plumage. A lot of the cardinalids, blue grosbeak, tanagers. Sometimes the first year males look real splotchy in ways that the adult males don't. Orioles frequently have kind of a unique first spring plumage. Orchard Oriole is one that comes to mind as having a very distinctive first spring male plumage. But that's when
Absolutely.
I see first spring, that's how I
And
interpret it. But
and
I
other birds
understand
like
that may not be official. Go ahead.
and other birds. No, I think you're spot on there. And other birds like gulls um, wear into first spring patterns that makes them very confusing.
Yeah, it's the
They
wear
get
that causes that plumage that makes it different. That's a
exactly.
good point.
But you'll see that in books that that's a first spring appearance. I believe Sibley uses that a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not necessarily a change of plumage like an actual molt. It's just those feathers
Wear.
worn down.
Yeah, especially those flight feathers,
Look like
because we
this.
talked about that with
Yes,
the bluebird, right? So the bluebird, they molt their flight feathers in, and then they hold on to those wing and tail feathers for that entire first year beyond the first year. So they've got them for like 14, 16 months. And a lot of times then that first spring, they have worn flight feathers, whereas the adult birds have just molted their flight feathers. So they have like brand new flight feathers, but the first year birds do not. And so for a bird that has like dark plumage, like a towhee, right? So a towhee has a dark back, dark flight feathers. Well, you can occasionally tell those first spring birds because their flight feathers look worn, a little grayish, a little brownish, not as clean black as the adult birds. So that's a way that you might, see first spring used in that context.
yeah, and as you guys, photography has become sort of the one of the driving, if not the driving force in birding currently. And people love to get pictures of birds in flight. And so if you get any good pictures of birds in flight, look at the wing feathers, and I bet you'll find some pictures where you can noticeably see old versus new. Because you'll catch a bird in molt, and you'll be able to tell the old feathers from the new feathers.
Yeah.
And again, in the it's mostly about seabirds, but it delves into others. Again, on the ID section of the ABA website, there's an article about wing molt
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
dives
we
in
go
pretty deep to that.
that is very weedy, a very weedy concept.
It is,
I
but
think,
yeah,
but it is kind of interesting how what molt can tell us. Even like simple observation, like when a bird gets its flight feathers, can tell you about the age of that bird that you might not have thought otherwise. But I do want to throw this bird up that Tim.
Yep.
Tim, what do you think about this one? We're gonna do some more high
won't-
wire bird identification.
I won't be able to see it for a couple of seconds here because I'm on a delay.
All right, so I'll just talk a little bit. It's a sparrow, so it's an Embarazid sparrow. When was this photo? Where was this photo taken? I'm gonna have to pull that. So Olympia, Washington, Pacific Northwest.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. I was looking.
Yeah.
Is that the one in the tree from below?
Yes, that's exactly
There
it.
it is. Okay, it just
Face
popped
is
up from.
face is screwy. You can't see its face.
Yeah.
It's a sparrow.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this bird. The brownish flanks. We can't be sure what we're seeing on the breast because I think all that dark is just we're looking through the feathers at the down, which is dark.
Yep.
So we really can't. We have to discount
It's ruffled
that.
or wet. Yeah, probably wet if it's Washington, Eastern Washington, or Western Washington.
Yeah, the dotted wing bars.
That's real interesting.
First impression for me is golden crowned, white crowned.
Yeah, I go with that.
And I can't really tell much about the bill. I mean, it could be pink, it could be gray. Is the light shining off of that? It's just with a blurred, obscured picture like this.
I think
tough.
golden crowned. I think golden crowned is a good bet because you can see a little bit of the bill there, and golden crowned has a bicolored bill, so the bottom mandible is going to be paler than the top, and I think we're looking at the bottom mandible right there. The wing bars, those zonotrichia, golden crowned, white throated, white crowned, they all have kind of that dotty, real thin wing bar. I think golden crowned is what this bird is most likely, though I don't know if I'd put a ton of money on it, but that's my guess.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah. We have a question from Chris Ortega who asks, Swallows seen in flight. Cliff, violet green, tree, rough wing can seem similar, especially if they are immature, somewhat distant. Swallows. I think swallows are one of the most underrated identification challenges in North America. And not necessarily because the
I
plumages are difficult, but because your viewing opportunities can be difficult on a bird that is moving so fast and changing direction so quickly.
Absolutely. A, a, there's a few, I don't know, you might call them tricks. Once you, if you spend a lot of time watching them, barn swallow, for instance, just even if you don't notice, you can't see, or it's younger, it doesn't have that long forked tail. They have a unique way of flying. It's almost like they turn themselves into bullets. Um, Roughwing and bank versus tree.
I always think of bank as like, because they're so tiny. Like that is a little
Yes,
swallow, and they buzz around really fast with little quick wing beats. They're like a bug almost when you see them flying in a flock of like a mixed flock.
absolutely, absolutely. And uh, Cliff is kind of it's a heftier bird.
Yeah.
And you should be able to see the pale buffy rump on a cliff swallow in any plumage when it's flying, at any age, any state of its life when it's old enough to fly. But that can be misleading because a rough-winged swallow with bright light on it can look awfully buffy. And if you just get a glimpse because the bird's moving like a rocket, it can be tough. One little trick with bank swallow is that they tend to show a little white that comes up around the sides of the neck and looks like a collar. So if you get a glimpse of the back of the bird and you see some white up around the neck from the back, that's usually a bank swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, swallows are one of those things that it really helps to go out and find a flock of them and just like watch them fly, because you'll be able to appreciate the differences in the way that the different species move, which really helps a lot. And it's one of those things that, a traditional field guide where you have like a static image or a picture, it doesn't help you a ton. Because yes, they all have extremely distinctive field marks, but as I said, like when the bird is moving, maybe the light's not great, maybe it's raining, maybe it's overcast. Like it's hard to see those things like you would in a field guide. And I would really go in and spend some time with swallows and, really try and dial in on how they're moving, what they're doing, how those wing beats are different. The way they fly, some are sort of more buoyant, some, as Greg said, like barn swallows are like fast and bullets, and bank swallows are little buzzy things. Like getting comfortable with those differences is what's really going to help a lot when you find something different. And it's one of those things.
Absolutely.
Like if you're watching a flock of tree swallows, they're all sort of moving the same way. That one that is moving differently, that's going to be a bird that you're going to want to dial in on. You're going to want to pay closer attention to, because you're going to notice it because it's moving different, rather than any of the traditional field marks that you might see. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? Otherwise, because I'm out of bird pictures, I'm going to check all the places where we are streaming this. So let's see. We've been at this about 45 minutes, so that's pretty good. If no one has any more questions, we may call it a day. We're going to try and be back next week. There are a couple announcements I do want to make. This Wednesday, we are doing our virtual bird club at 8 p.m. Please check that out. It's Juita Martinez. She is giving a talk on the brown pelicans of Louisiana. She's a graduate student that does work on those pelicans. She has a lot of really cool experiences of being in a pelican colony, which is
that's going to be a good
weird place.
Yeah.
So definitely check that out. We're excited to have her. What else do we have going on? Anything else that's important to mention here? If you enjoy these sorts of programs, please consider becoming a member of the ABA or donating to our current appeal. It's our spring summer appeal that's going on. So if you want to throw $5, $10 at the ABA, because you
Please
appreciate these
do.
sorts of things, please feel free to do
And
so.
as I was mentioning earlier, if you join, we do have on the member portal, we have discounts for members for things like Cornell's Birds of the World, and other
Princeton
vendors.
University Press,
Princeton University Press. You want a discount on some really fantastic field guides?
including some of the ones we've talked
We can
about,
help you
like
out
Better
there.
Birding by George Armistead and Brian Sullivan.
Yep, exactly.
Lynn Kopka asks, what criteria do you advise for local clubs to resume group outings? I'm glad that's out of my hands. That's all I'll say to that.
Yeah.
It's above my pay grade.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade too. I haven't, except for going. Geez, where did I go? I can't even remember now. But I don't think I've left my property more than 5 times since March 14th. So I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Yeah. I went out and took a walk with my family this morning at the military park, the Guilford Military Park here in Greensboro. It's a National Park Service property, and it was a Revolutionary War battle, and they just opened up the drive. But it's always been really nice. But it's wide, like we can socially distance with everyone around us, so it's actually nice. Jenny Shockley made it for the last 5 minutes. Congratulations. We're about finished here.
Well, you will be able. This will be on our YouTube channel, so if you want to
Yes.
pop into YouTube, and we will, you can watch this from the beginning.
Yep. If
And
you
if
like.
And these are all available through aba.org/live. That'll be in. There's a link there to our YouTube channel. Just click the YouTube logo on that page, which will go into our YouTube channel.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll say goodbye for this afternoon. We'll be back next week to talk more about bird identification, and if it's anything like this one, I bet we'll be talking a little bit more about fledgling birds and molt. So
Yep.
Look forward to that. But we'll see you.
Good to see you, Nate.
We'll see you next week. Good to see you, Greg. We'll see all of you in the What's This Bird group. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye, folks.
See ya.